this afternoon, and I want to appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. As you heard earlier, I am the former Commissioner of Juvenile Justice for the state of Kentucky and former Vice Chair of the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice. Most of my work the last 20 years has been in youth services, usually as an advocate and a juvenile justice reformer. This afternoon, I'm excited to spend some time with you all really focusing on this opportunity youth population, especially this population experiencing disabilities of some sort. I wanted to start with a couple of questions. Question number one, what most excites you about working with this opportunity youth population? A chance to build relationships and trust. B, a chance to use and share new skills. C, I'm not quite sure what to expect. Or D, meh. That's something my son taught me. Meh kind of means whatever. The second question, what concerns, if any, do you have about serving this population of opportunity youth? I'll give you a chance to vote on that first question you see in the corner there. Give you a few more seconds. Great. Now, my second question is, what concerns might you have about taking up this work with opportunity youth population? A, how will we measure? B, this will be more time intensive. What about my other work? C, this is not what I signed up for. Or I think we're going to be okay, or no vote. And finally, I'm curious what kind of skills or training you'd like to have to help make you better prepared to serve this population. Great. Well, as you all finish up answering, we're going to go ahead and get back into the presentation. I can't get to my button. So one of the things that I do very often is talk about the challenge we face getting young people on that trajectory from cradle to career, and how much of a challenge it is, because very often we wind up looking at the school to prison pipeline instead of the cradle career pipeline. And so many of our young people who are facing challenges, not to mention multiple challenges, more often find themselves drained to this other part of the system. And I think it's the thing that you all are going to be dealing with or have dealt with for so long. One of the things that I've found in my work and my research is that there's a slippery slope for young people moving into the system. If you look at seclusion, suspension, arrest, and referral, this slide here tells you really quickly, young people of color, especially American Indian, Native American, and African American boys with disabilities, 25% of them with disabilities experience some kind of seclusion. And nearly 20% of girls in that demographic receive out-of-school suspension. Students with disabilities are twice as likely to receive suspension than students without disability, 13% versus 6%. Students with disabilities represent only 12% of our student population, but they represent 58% of those placed in seclusion, 75% of those physically restrained at school, and 25% of students who are arrested or referred to law enforcement. So clearly we can quickly see that there's a transactional challenge with young people with disabilities. Students with disabilities receive out-of-school suspensions at a higher rate than students without disabilities. Students with disabilities who are young people of color, even more so. As you can see by this slide, that data is very clear, and it has been persistent for a long time. But wait, there's more. If you look a little closer, the data tells us that a young person who experiences suspension is much more likely to drop out of school before completion. In fact, the more suspensions a young person experiences, the more likely they are to leave school before graduation. When you look at this data, there's a slide here. It shows that 0 suspensions. There's a 16% high school dropout rate. About a 75% of students graduate, and about 58% of students go on to post-secondary education, those who have no suspensions. When you get to the far end, at 4 or more suspensions, 53% of kids with 4 or more suspensions drop out. 23% of kids with 4 or more suspensions graduate, and only 23% of those same young people go on to higher education. So quickly we can build a case for education being that core, the place where things have to happen for young people to be successful. But it's more dire than that. When young people drop out, a dropout is 3.5 times more likely than a high school graduate to be arrested, 8 times more likely to experience jail, and 63 times more likely, I'm going to let that sit in, 63 times more likely to be institutionalized than peers who graduate high school and attend college. And so everything about the work that you all do is about us reclaiming and refocusing young people who are more likely than not going to be the ones dropping out of these systems into the justice system. And that system costs us hundreds of millions of dollars a year with no return on investments. When I ran juvenile justice, it became clear to me that there was a strong corollary between disability and justice involvement. It's estimated that 70% of justice-involved youth have some form of disability. I ran counts in my agency on a number of occasions, just a daily count, and it was never less than 80% of the young people that had some kind of disability or major traumatic or dramatic experience that was impacting their development and growth. So all those things together really give us a strong picture of the challenges you face every day in order to get these young people that we serve and we choose to serve to their best places. And I'm excited that you're in the work because we need more hope dealers. This slide right here is a diagram. It is a circle divided into 4 quadrants. I call it the adolescent brain clock. It tracks the 24 or 25-year adolescent brain development theory, along with all the major theories of development, Havinghurst, Kohlberg, Piaget, all those folks that we learn one way or another through our work with young people in these systems. If you look at this, and the reason it's important, even though I think it's a difficult slide to see, is because the woman, Dana Swayze, from the Minnesota Department of Juvenile Justice, who created this graph, did an amazing job of tracking all the major theories of development along with our adolescent brain development science in a way that allowed us to see quadrant by quadrant the kind of developmental milestones a young person has to have successfully completed to successfully move on to the next quadrant, moving toward matriculation into adulthood. If you can imagine in each of those moments, when a young person experiences some trauma, some drama, some pain, something that stops the clock. It could be educational challenges, it could be family disadvantage, it could be abuse, all those things that happen to young people's lives. No matter how good the services we are, how well we do our job to get the clock started again, that young person might find themselves seconds, minutes, over time, maybe even hours behind their peer cohort. So when they move through this adolescent cycle into the 3rd quadrant, where they began to look like adults, into teen years, but they're still responding to the world out of their developmental age, which might be 2nd or even 1st quadrant, that's when we usually see the big challenges with young people come up. This is when they look like adults, and so their actions are no longer cute or no longer actions that call for help. They are dangerous. And this is when young people are most likely to react to the world out of their challenges and be met with a criminal justice response. This is when they usually come into my systems, and very rarely do they walk away from those systems. And I think this slide is important, and it helped me dramatically change the way I looked at the young people I serve when I understood those developmental delays and challenges that might be slowing them from getting to where we want them to be, and we have to go back to meet them where they are, to lead them where they dream. And it's not easy sometimes to keep that frame in our heads. But why does all this matter? It matters because every child has a story. This is important to me, not because it's been my professional work my entire adult career, but because this is the story that I lived and survived. My name is Hassan Davis, and growing up with ADHD and dyslexia, with the visual impairment and deaf in one ear, I was not the kid that anybody thought was going to be viable. In fact, in 1st grade, when all the other children were learning their alphabet and writing their names, I was the kid who couldn't sit still and couldn't stop touching things that weren't his and asking questions that didn't pertain to the class. And in fact, I couldn't take lines and make letters. I couldn't take letters and make words, and I couldn't make words make sense. So one day, my 1st grade teacher, in her frustration, grabbed me by the arm and dragged me across that room, to the back of the room, to the coat room, to the closet where we keep all the things no one needs. When we got there, she turned to me and said, "This is your new classroom." And as she turned around and walked out, she locked the door behind her. And day after day, this became our ritual. She would escort me to that box every morning and explain that this was the place that I belonged, and she will go back to serve the children that meant something to the world. And I sat there day after day, screaming at the coats and punching the walls and accepting that this is where broken things go. And my mother always taught me there's 2 things you can do anytime you find yourself in difficult places. First, you can figure out how you got there. And second, you can figure out how you make it useful. Well, I knew why I was there because I was that broken child, but how do you make this useful? I had no idea. And one day, I'm looking around the coat room after screaming at the walls and clearing my eyes, and I look up and I realize, I don't know why it took me so long, that the coat room is where everybody keeps their lunch boxes. And all of a sudden, God's plan was revealed, my meaning, because Susie had the peanut butter jelly sandwiches without the crust, Bobby always had fruit cups, and Jimmy always had Tang instant breakfast drink. And back in the day, Tang was everything. And so for a few days, I ate good, which was important because having moved around and my family falling apart at some point, I didn't always get 3 meals a day. And so this was God's meaning for me. I ate very well until Mom started coming to school complaining about their children coming home hungry. They came to investigate the mystery of the coat room like a Scooby-Doo episode, and there I was with lunchboxes spread around me like a buffet. And that teacher was so frustrated, she dragged me out of that box across that classroom to sit me in that seat right next to her so she could keep an eye on that bad child who eats other people's food, and what she accidentally did. Not out of compassion, not out of hope for a better outcome, but out of absolute desperation, she accidentally restarted my clock. And sometimes all we need is a little bit of space to run and just a little light. And so that's the way my life continued to be. Over the course of my childhood, I attended 5 different elementary schools. I lived in 13 different homes. I got my first arrest when I was 11 years old, a long, drawn-out thing I'm not going to get into detail about, except to say that at the end of that day, on that long ride home with my mother, instead of the anger and angst that comes from having to deal with a child like me every day, all day, instead of the natural frustration, on that long road, I had the courage to finally look at her, and she was crying. She looked at me and she simply said this: "If you could see what I see every time I look at you, then you would know how great you already were." It didn't make any sense to me at the time, but I realize now that she was planting a seed of possibility. She was daring me to imagine that I could be something more to the world than what the world had given me permission to be. And that shaped me. After 7th grade, I began alternative school. In alternative school, I learned from Dr. Lorraine Wilson, the administrator there and my teacher, that I could be more. She challenged me to not be frustrated because I couldn't do math like other children, but one day a week she did mental math, and you could use no paper and pencil, and I was always the best. And so one day a week she gave me the chance to be math god of the universe so that I could sit and I could feel comfortable being in a place where other people knew more than me 4 days a week, knowing that I had a chance to shine. These are the things that allow young people in crisis to imagine themselves greater. I did get expelled from alternative school, and I got my GED. But with the support of Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mother, Alice Lovelace, I still believed I could go to college. And because I wanted to be great, I wanted to imagine, in spite of being this young man who everyone gave up on, the young man with the bandana and the aviator glasses and the army jacket and the bad attitude, the young man who prowled the streets because I wanted respect, but I would settle for fear. I believed that I could do more. And so I talked myself into college. I went to Berea College, and although I was still using a 3rd grade penmanship pad to practice my handwriting every night when my roommate went to sleep, and I was still struggling to read 2 or 3 pages a night over and over again with enough repetition that I might make an intuitive leap in class every day to prove I deserved to be there, I was afraid to let other people know that I needed things. And that eventually caught up with me, and I was expelled from college. I talked myself back into college a year later, and I was expelled again because I still wasn't prepared to enlist other people in my journey. I was afraid to show that I needed help because then they would know I didn't deserve to be there. But I finally understood the 3rd time I returned that I needed help to get to my best place, and I asked the college if they would give me money for a computer. And it's the first time that personal computers were available. I had a Mac Plus with spell check, which made all the difference in the world. I made the dean's list my first semester back. I was elected homecoming king and voted president of the student body. I had a chance to really live the life that others had imagined for me all these years. And so I was really excited, and I went on to law school, which didn't get any easier, but I was challenged to keep moving forward to prove that I had the ability to be anything I chose to be, that no one would diss my ability to dream big and be great. And so that has led me to the work that I do now. And it's important. In the last year, I've spent lots of time actually working with the opportunity youth population that you will be serving. I've worked to develop training and support services for workforce development teams in eastern Kentucky and rural Kentucky, working with young people coming out of the criminal justice system who meet the opportunity youth criteria. So I was very excited about hearing the chance to be with you all, knowing that that this is the work you all are doing, building those social emotional connections, creating real engagement, and reaching out to the community to build the support network that every young person deserves. And so I'm excited to be there. I'd like to share with you a couple of the rules. I call them pages from the Hope Dealer's Notebook, and I'm just going to share the first 2 with you. I know that our time is tight. These are the rules. When I think about my mother, Alice Lovelace, and I think about Dr. Lorraine Wilson, my administrator at the alternative school, and the things that they gave me, the tools they provided me. I've been able to sift through those over the last 10 or 15 years to really come up with the lessons that help me in my work, my own work as a hope dealer. And so I want to share just a couple of those with you. And the first is really simple. Resist the madness. The insanity principle is simple. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting. And too often we're so caught up in the way things have always been done that we don't try to get to our innovation, our creativity. In order for us to get a different outcome, we're going to have to do something different. 2 plus 2 will always be 4 unless we choose to change some symbol in the process. We can't keep praying that when we hit the equal sign, magically something different will occur. And innovation for us is stepping out and trying new programming, engaging in social emotional development, affective and feeling domain, those real essential skills that young people need, and how we provide those and keep a growth mindset about it. But John Maxwell said it even better. If you keep doing what you've always done, your competition gets better, but you get worse results. It's not a 50-sum game. You don't get to just break even. Our competition continues to innovate, and our competition is drug use. Our competition is abuse. Our competition is youth criminality. Our competition is gangs. Our competition is high school dropouts. All those things that we fight against get better, innovate, and convince young people that they are the route to go if we don't get more creative in how we engage these young people. And so we have to fight the insanity and resist the urge to just stay where we are. We have to act with faith. And when I say faith, I don't mean religion. I mean a belief that is actionable. And faith is not just believing in something. When I was young and our house burned down, there were lots of people who prayed for us, but the idea of praying for us and then walking away isn't what faith is. The Pope once said that, yes, we pray for the hungry, and then we feed them. That's how prayer works. And for us, it's the same thing. We believe that every child can have a great life, can reach amazing things. And then we put into action that belief by providing the right services and supports, connecting to the right opportunities and programs, and then those things come alive. And so I think it's important for us to keep in mind that this really is about belief plus action. And we can't lower the bar. We can't try and make it so easy for them because we feel bad for them that they trip over it and never get to the real success that they can have. And I struggle through this because this is one of those points that I have a hard time making clear enough. When I was in law school, I finally found the courage to seek out vocational rehab for support and services. And I want you to know this story. I don't tell this story very often, but it's important for me that you hear this. I went to my vocational rehab counselor and finally got online to really fire things up. And when I went to meet her for my final assessment, she sat with this amazing, compassionate look on her face. And then she told me that I had failed so much in my life that going to law school was just going to be another failure and that she could not have that on her conscience. She couldn't have that on her conscience, that I was bold enough to try something that people like me weren't supposed to try. And so she tried to convince me that I should try something else. She had some great programs that I would be very good at that would be more suited to me. And it almost broke my heart because she couldn't see all the scars that I had developed, all the calluses, that I was a fighter, and all I needed was somebody willing to fight with me, and I knew that there was nothing I couldn't accomplish. And so that experience, and I want to be clear, that was almost 30 years ago and a totally different system from the system that I encounter every time I travel across the nation and meet with VR champions like you all. So I know it was an anomaly now, but at the moment, I thought that was the system that our children, the most needy, the greatest hope, were facing. And for me, I almost lost my faith in the entire system. But I did find other champions to support me and people to help me get through to graduate from law school. And I know that you, being on this call, being here present today, have made the commitment to be a part of that solution. And I hope that understanding what has happened and what could happen will help you prevent that being the trap you get caught up in. Sometimes We try to save our children from themselves. I was curious, where do you think uh, ability comes before opportunity? Have you ever had this? People always say things like, if you act right, then I'll let you stay here. If you could do these things and, if you could make it up the mountain here, I'd lead you to the top. But where does ability come before opportunity? Do you think it comes before opportunity when you're learning a new language? Somebody can speak it before they get the chance to try it. Do you think it comes from cooking a fancy meal? How about tuning up a car engine? Or maybe all of those are places where ability comes before opportunity. Or maybe it's just in the dictionary. Well, it looks like you all have experiences just like me in so many ways. The only place that I've ever found that ability comes before opportunity is in the dictionary. Our young people don't get to greatness. We did not become as great as we are by showing people that we could do something and them giving us a chance to try it. You can't teach a child how to swim in the parking lot of a pool. We don't get in the water, then we don't get the experience, the muscle memory that allows us to kick hard when we know our life depends on it. So why are we doing this in so many other ways? We tell young people, especially young people facing challenges and disabilities, that if they can act right, then they can stay in class. If we could get them to do a certain thing a certain way, then we would give them an internship. We have to introduce them to opportunity. We have to build a network of partners out there that are willing to give chances so that people can build the muscle memory to have real talent and skill. And I think that that's one of the challenges I see very often. And I hope that that you all see it too and recognize that as you do this work, that we have to continue to build opportunity so that young people can really get to their skill sets and talents. The only place you find it is the dictionary. I want you to refuse to allow your office to become the place where dreams go to die. Too often I hear people talk about the work that we do for young people like hospice work, giving them a good experience because life's not going to be great for them the rest of their life. And so it's not really about building hope and possibility, but just this one moment that they can really shine on instead of helping them figure out the tools they need to struggle if they have to struggle, but to get through their whole life with that struggle. Being a hope dealer requires us to nurture a growth mindset. It requires us to believe in something that's not seen, the possible instead of just the present. We'll always be presented with challenges and things that seem difficult, but if we can continue to hold a both and, to see them right here and say, and because I'm here, we have the chance of doing some amazing things. For those of us who do this great work, hope is mandatory. You have to believe you can do this before it can happen because you can't give something you don't possess. And hope is something that we have to have, a belief in future possibility, a reliance that if I act today, tomorrow could be, not will be, but could be better. Now here's the big question. I don't know how many times I've had this question asked to me in trainings or seminars. When is it finally okay for me to just give up? Have any of you ever had this question? I mean, not out loud maybe, but even just to yourself. When can I finally just, give up? Usually when I say to these folks is, being a hope dealer is like wrestling an 800-pound alligator. And they're always like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, sure. When you wrestle an 800-pound alligator, you don't give up when you get tired. You should only give up when the gator gets tired. And you should always remember that the gator never gets tired. That's the standard. If we have to hold on tight, we have to tap out, we need to get assistance. All of those are important parts of our preservation, but we don't give up. I mean, maybe it's okay to give up if you retire. But what I've known about this work is that most of us who retire, we go back in as a volunteer or into another program within a month because this is the work we do. This is where we know we make a difference. And so as tired as we get, we have to nurture the idea that we have more to give. And The longer we hold on, the greater the chance is we can get this under control. We can create possibility for our young folks. And I want you to, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said that if you treat a man as he is, he will remain as he is. That's me. Back when I was a young person who didn't care about the world because I thought the world didn't care about me. That I would settle for fear because I knew that respect wasn't something the world was willing to give me. But I still wanted to be more. But all people could see was that kid that didn't deserve anything else. People like my mother and Dr. Wilson did see something different. But the rest of that quote is amazing. It says, if you treat a man as he can and should be, he will become as he can and should be. And because I had people like you who chose to grace me with their possibility, to see me in my possible, not just my present, I was able to transform from that broke, angry young man who wanted to destroy the whole world to someone who wanted to give and create, to serve as a soldier, to graduate from law school, to hold my first child in my arms, things I never thought were possible when I was that other man because the world wasn't going to allow me those luxuries, those opportunities. But because people like you stood in the breach between harm and hope, this life became possible. And I want to be really clear, I have no question that my life trajectory was on a downward spiral without people like you who chose to be a part of it. And I did lots of work, just like every young person you serve will have to do work, but without someone to imagine and envision a future with them, like you could, like my mother could, like Dr. Rain Wilson did, then it would not be possible to imagine that I could be more to the world and give more to the world than I took. So I want to thank you for being that courageous person, being here and connected with the idea of being a hope dealer, to be the one to hold the line for these young people. Now, as we finish up, I know we'll hopefully have time for questions. We got started a little late, but I wanted to leave you with a couple of thoughts on self-care, because I think this is the piece where many of us get tangled. As important as it is for us to be there for these young people and their families and the work that we do, if we are not taking care of ourselves, if you are not taking care of yourself, then you can't possibly care appropriately for other folk. And so make sure that you're building a self-care regimen. Make sure that you're creating opportunity to check in with other people to help balance your heart and soul, because we need you in this work long term. This isn't a short-term fix, and this isn't short-term work. So we need you primed and ready to hold on and to roll with that gator as long as we need you to. I want to thank you all for the amazing work you do and for the chance to be here and a part of this VR for VR conversation. And I'm willing to open up for questions if we have any questions, Alicia.
And Hassan, this is Alicia on the line. I just want to let you know that I'm going to help to monitor the chat window, but we do encourage folks to enter their questions in, and we'll elevate them from there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I can see we have a lot of thank yous for such an inspiring and influential story, and I would echo those comments.
Thank you.
Oh, here's one question from Sins Klein. Who coined the term compassion fatigue?
That is a great question. I don't know where I first saw it. I've only seen it in probably the last 5 years or so in this work, where that's been the term that I've heard used. But I don't remember the first time that I heard it. But I thought that it really captured what happens in the field and with folks doing this work very well. When I saw it, I was like, that's what it is. You know, we give so much of ourselves into this that we exhaust ourselves, and I think it's important to be able to recognize it for what it is.
Wonderful. And then we have Leah Diaz, who wanted to know a little bit more about why you ultimately chose the path that you chose for your life, including what led you to pursue your GED. So that's a combination of two different questions, but I think both relevant and connected.
Sure. So I got expelled from alternative school about the same time that my best friend uh, and foster brother Derek was expelled, and then my younger brother Sean. And one of the things that I continue to do is look at the talent that was in my family and say that, Dr. Rain Wilson and my mother, Alice Lovelace, couldn't be wrong. So we have to keep pushing, even though, and so we decided to take the GED, Derek and I, because we wanted to prove that this wasn't the defining moment for us. And after that, uh, we decided that going on to college had to happen. Now, I had no idea about college, but everybody told me that that's where you go next if you're about anything in the world. And so, I thought I was going to be about something, even with a 1.67 GPA and a juvenile criminal record and ADHD and exposure from alternative school. I was like, yeah, that's my life. And so it really was a blind bid. I actually called the school that accepted me because I hadn't received my acceptance a week before classes started, which meant they actually didn't accept me. I learned that later. But because I called, I convinced someone to take another look, and they gave me a chance. And everything about that experience was new and frightening without a support system. But I realized that the only way I was going to clear a path for my brothers and other folks who struggled like me was if I was hard-headed enough not to back down the ladder just because people told me I didn't deserve to be there. And so that became my commitment, that no matter how much it took or how hard I had to run to the wall, I wasn't going to stop until I finally got something that could prove that I deserved to be there. And that was my educational career for the rest of it, always fighting. I got expelled from law school 3 times, mostly because of disability service issues. And I just refused to leave because I said, if you're not going to serve me the way I deserve to be served, then I'm not going to leave, and you have to figure that out. And so we fought about it, and eventually they realized that I was serious. I wasn't going to leave. That's like wrestling the alligator. Once I decided, I wasn't going to let go, and eventually the system had to adjust and do what it was supposed to do in the first place, give me the tools I needed to be the person I dreamed.
Thank you, Hassan. We've got a couple great questions in here. One that centers around mentorship and the role that VR counselors played in helping you to achieve your goal. Can you speak a little bit about their involvement as well as the extent to which folks in law school or other places where you studied helped you along your journey? And then we'll take another question that's more specific to law enforcement after you've addressed that question.
Okay. I think that the support that I got in undergrad in particular was amazing. And I'll be clear, the challenge for me was that I wasn't prepared. I didn't feel safe enough telling people I needed help until I got backed into a corner. But when I finally got to the point where I realized I would not be able to move any further without there being some additional support, the folk at the college, like I said, they loaned me the money for my first computer with spell check and grammatic programming that allowed me to then learn how to use the tools that would really get me there. And so the support from disability services, we didn't have voc rehab at the college, but disability services and the dean that supported that were pretty amazing. And that was a game changer. And I think that when I went to law school, I was challenged by my first encounter, but then after I had to get retested, some other things that were just issues. But once I was able to get tested and get a baseline, then the college itself was able to provide me with some supports using my computer, doing tests, extra time, those types of things, using audio cassettes to learn and not having to buy those big books, a lot of things that people don't like in law school. And so those support systems, the counselors there and the administrators who were willing to accept that they had a responsibility to give me the tools I needed really made a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I want to go back to an earlier question about law enforcement. We had an attendee who asked the question, do you feel that there is adequate training for police officers to prevent unnecessary arrests?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is really simple, no. And I'll explain. I believe that the idea of policing has changed dramatically. The need of policing has changed dramatically, but the training and the idea of what a police officer is hasn't. You know, our historical sense of police has shifted to what I think needs to be a community policing model. They need to be a part of the community. So trauma informed, not just trauma informed, but trauma responsive training. They need to understand social emotional learning and the affective domain, the feeling house, emotional connectedness. They need to actually know how to engage people in relationship building. And these are all things that are uh, opposite of what our current law enforcement model is, because it's based on convincing most of our law enforcement that they are in a war against the whole community instead of in a war for the whole community. They're fighting for the community instead of with the community. And I think that's a dramatic, subtle shift. It's a small shift, but it's dramatic if we can convince them that we really are together and they're part of the team. And those types of skills have to be there for them to be able to negotiate and manage relationship with young people and people in crisis across the board.
Thank you, Hassan. Okay, so we have another question about, when did you learn that you had ADHD, and more specifically, what it meant in terms of your learning style?
No, I knew I was different. Of course, when I was young, they just called us SPED, right? Special ed. And they would remove me from class and send me to the room with no windows with the other kids. And so for a long time, that was the experience. My mother was always the advocate who would come to school and demand that be put back into a classroom with other students because that's where I was engaged. And so she was the one kind of piecing together who and what I was before we had a name for it. I guess when I got to alternative school, it became more clear. Dr. Lorraine Wilson was a psychologist and a trained counselor, and so she was able to identify and see those things more clearly. And then, we started doing every time there was a 2020 special about dyslexia and using the different colored lenses or the one strip, cut out of a note card to see, we would experiment with everything we could to figure out what tools would be useful for me. But it really was a trial and error thing because there wasn't a lot of information or a lot of support to the general public on how to navigate that. And growing up most of my life economically disadvantaged and moving quite a bit, we didn't have the stability for there to be, we didn't have counselors and therapy and opportunities to really access formal systems. And so it really was my mother and her reading and digging for information, anything that might give me just another moment to realize and create a different scenario.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we probably have time for one or two more questions. One that came up that I think would really be relevant for everybody who's tuned in is can you speak a little bit more about how to build a relationship with young people, particularly those who have had, some really difficult circumstances growing up, and maybe as a VR counselor, you haven't had those same shared experiences, and so there's sometimes this wall that gets built up, like, you don't, as a young person, you may see the VR counselor as somebody who can't really understand what you've gone through and therefore can't help you. So what would your advice be to VR counselors who have impacted that, and really how do they make the young people that they're working with feel safe?
That's a great question. And I think, there are lots of pieces to it, but I think the core of it is communication. I have people all the time say, well, my life is so boring, so I don't know how to connect to them. Well, one, young people in crisis need to know that everybody in the world is not in crisis. So it's good that they can see that, oh, your life seems pretty normal. Seems like, that things go well. And so there's a place that I can get to. I think that being able to have rapport to sit down and say, I understand that our experiences are different, but this is my intent, right? And I think it's very important for young people to hear you say out loud that your intent is to be there with them to find the path to where they want to be is very powerful. But then you have to be there, right? Because I think presence is the thing most often lacking from meaningful experiences with young people. People transition through their life at such a high rate that they don't expect you to be back twice. And so your ability to be consistent with your presence and your expectations, and not just that you have a high expectation, but you continue to show them that you're providing them with the skills and the support and the services so they can actually reach those things over time, right? It's not 1 week, it's not a couple of days, but it's you being present and saying, as long as it takes for us to get there, and I think that's going to be the challenge with this model. That's what I've seen with the folks I've worked with already, is how do we do this when we have these expectations of all these other things? But that's what I mean by, change the insanity. We have to switch the system up and innovate. We may have to spend more time with this population. We have to build deeper relationships. It can't be a transactional engagement. This has to be a relational engagement, and that means that we have to retool. We have to build new social emotional skills and motivational interviewing skills and build a growth mindset and reset ourselves so that we can actually be in a position to have those conversations and really open up to their needs in a way that allows us to have a back and forth.
Wonderful. And I think we can maybe sneak in one final question before we transition over to our first panel. And that one is really around, what made you brave enough to ask for help? I think that's like the flip side of the question you just responded to. And then, what innovation is necessary in this space? And after you've responded, we'll transition into the first panel.
Okay, I think what made me brave enough was desperation. I realized that, and again, it's just like I say with us, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting. And I wanted something new bad enough that I was finally willing to take a risk. I've been taking physical risk and life-threatening risks with my life as a child growing up on the streets all my life. And why not take a risk like this, And so I had to trust people I didn't have a reason to trust. They hadn't given me things that led to my ability to trust, but believing that if I was willing to step out a little bit, they would be willing to step a little closer, and maybe somewhere in the middle we could connect, and someone would throw me a lifeline. And so part of it was just being convinced that falling would not be the end of my life, because I'd fallen many times, and that if you reach out, maybe somebody will be there to catch you, and that's where the other side, you folks, come in, being willing to show people that you're reaching out, and all they got to do is take a chance. And it doesn't always work, but when it does, it has great results.
Just innovation, like if you had to pick the top thing that innovation in this space that would really move the needle, what would it be?
Sure. I think that our use of data to drive the work we do is important. We have done work for the history of our institutions and not always had the ability or desire to track whether it had made a difference. And so our ability to track, and I call it a results-based frame, how much we do, how well we do it, and who's better off because of it, the ability to actually put those things out so we can actually have and track systems improvement, because we know what worked. We know where we succeeded and failed, and we can go back and actually improve. Innovation comes from us knowing clearly what doesn't work so that we can try something new, not just guessing over and over again. That's not innovation, that's desperation. And we have to be innovative, which is very methodical, and is based on us using the information in front of us to drive the action we do, and then reflecting on that to figure out what our next action is.
Thank you, Hassan. I just want to thank you on behalf of IEL, YTAC, and all of the attendees for your candid and powerful story. You've gone through many steps and aspects of your life journey, and I'd like to think that it's all it's put you in such a wonderful position to be able to help other young people who have experienced similar situations as yourself. And I think you've set up our day one and day two conversation perfectly. That analogy that you talked about in terms of the 800-pound gator, we can never get tired in this work, because there are young people who right. Have so many have so much potential, have so many skills, that we must make sure that they are able to make the smooth transitions that they need to in their life or over the course of their life. So I want to thank you again for your opening talk, and I'll transition us next into our first panel session of the day, which I think is a great segue from the points and the issues that Hassan brought up. It's really, this panel is focused on the tips, advice, and innovative strategies of working with youth, opportunity youth in this space. We've invited Francine Francis, who is a member of the IEL team here, and also the director for the Right Turn program here at IEL, to lead that conversation. So I'm going to flip over the program to her, and she'll introduce you to her panelists. So thank you. Stay tuned.
Hi, Francine.
You know why?
We're having some trouble hearing you.
But thank you for letting me know. All right, I'll start over since I was on mute. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francine Francis, and I'm the program director for the Right Turn Career Focused Transition Initiative, also known as Right Turn, here at the Institute for Educational Leadership in DC. And I will be the moderator for today's session on tips, advice, and innovative strategies, navigating within the opportunity youth space. And just a little bit about my background experience. I've worked several years in direct program services, from homeless youth transitional living program to WIOA as a case manager, and most currently, in the most current years, I've worked on the ground with court-involved youth, and now I'm overseeing our national project, a reentry grant called Right Turn. And I just want to say thank you to Hassan, because something you said really hit home for me. You mentioned that we need to stay innovative to stay above the negative competition, and to never lower the bar, because opportunity youth are worth the highest expectation. And I very much agree with this, with that and everything you have shared, and I just really appreciate you kicking us off today. And Alicia mentioned this is such a great transition. So even throughout the chat box conversations, there's been several comments I heard or read from our audience about their efforts to collaborate with correctional facilities and detention centers, and even the challenges around that, which is great because we will be able to discuss some of these things with our panelists from their experience in the justice system, including partnerships. It can be really a transformative collaboration effort if we can establish those connections to help better serve young people who need access to resources and just simply an opportunity. Great, someone just told me that audio sounds good, so we'll keep it moving. So for today, you know, we're going to really talk about connecting opportunity youth to educational and employment opportunities, and that can be seem very complicated and challenging. However, there are strategies that work. And part of our learning objectives today is, throughout the panel discussion, you will have the opportunity to hear from youth service professionals who will highlight their own experiences with community partnerships, including examples of how they collaborated with other youth serving organizations and how they share that mutual benefit. You will also hear from our very young people lifting their voices on the challenges, the support, and the success of being in a youth serving program. And last but not least, we will share effective ways to engage opportunity youth in recruitment, enrollment, and actively just being engaged in programming. And I know those key three things are everything that youth programs are always having challenges on, and we hope that you gather some insight from their perspective on next steps that you can go back and explore. And today I have the pleasure of having 4 panelists join me to share their experiences within the Opportunity Youth space. And if you can join me on webcam, that'd be great. They will share their knowledge and lived experiences with relationships, with partnerships, community and youth engagement, and even the challenges and success. Hi, everyone. If you could just wave, that'd be great. It's great to see your faces. So without further ado, I would like to introduce each panelist with a brief bio and a fun fact to share with you all. We have Chuck Beard. Can you wave to everyone? He is a youth service specialist and an employment specialist as well at the Wasnt Center in Nashville, Tennessee. And Chuck has worked over 7 years with court-involved youth. And a fun fact about Chuck is he is currently training for another marathon that is taking place in Cincinnati in May called the Flying Pig. How's the training going? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Eh? One day at a time, definitely.
I'm here.
And we also have Elizabeth Glacier joining us. Can you wave, Elizabeth? Thanks. She has experience with court-involved youth as well, ranging from ages 16 to 24 years old. And a fun fact about Elizabeth is that she loves to travel. She's been to 6 countries, and she plans to travel more in the future. Elizabeth, what's one place that you would love to go to next? So you could take me with you.
Hoping
Great.
to reach
and
that.
I see Vicki in the chat box said that she is going to be joining you, Chuck, on the Flying Pigs Marathon. And also moving forward, we have Wade Gross. Can you wave to everyone, Wade? He is currently working at Peckham. He is a Right Turn program participant, and we'll explain what Right Turn is real quickly after introductions. And he is located in Lansing, Michigan. He is currently working at Peckham as a scanner packager in the warehouse. Awesome. And he is a father of 2 daughters, and he has a long-term goal of becoming a psychologist. And 2 fun facts about Wade. He is a pro disc golfer and an anime buff. I wonder if anyone in the chat can relate to either one, but very unique and interesting hobbies. And then last but not least, we have Joshua Johnson joining us. To highlight some of his success, he last year earned a few industry-recognized credentials, pretty awesome. And he had the opportunity to visit Washington, D.C. last year as a youth representative for Oasis. And fun fact about Josh, he loves working with automobiles, and he dreams to create his own car one day. Is there a specific car you'd like to create one day?
No,
Can you repeat that again, Josh?
I'm sick of having made my mind up.
No problem. Well, when you find out, you can make my next car. But something I'd just like to add before we move on to our panel discussion is that both Peckham and Oasis Center are current Right Turn program sites through IEL, through our reentry project called Right Turn. A quick overview of Right Turn. We provide a career development process for young people through an individualized approach to education, training, workforce development opportunities by engaging our young people in a 3-phase career development process, which is called our Individualized Career Development Plan, also known as the ICDP. So young people meet with our youth staff regularly through individualized case management to promote employment, continued learning opportunities, leadership development, a holistic approach to services, including mentoring support. So you can learn more about Right Turn if you would like. There is a link at the end of this slideshow that we could share with you all to learn more about our program. And both Chuck and Elizabeth are Right Turn program staff, and Wade and Josh are program participants of our program. So I am thrilled to have all four of you join me on this webinar session today. So I have a quick question with our audience. What do you wish Opportunity Youth knew about VR agencies? And you will see a poll chat pod show up in a few seconds, and you'll have the opportunity to respond to that through there. So what do you wish Opportunity Youth knew about VR agencies? Think about the false myths, the facts, the highlights, the fun facts, just to give you some examples of what you could add to your wish list. Very simple, that we exist. VR can make their dreams come true? Absolutely. Sky's the limit. Love the enthusiasm. Services are individualized to you. Definitely. They are here to help with a good career match. There's funding available. Definitely. I think partners would love to hear that as well from the community. How the process works. A lot of motivational feedback as well. Nobody is helpless. They can help you make money in all caps. Who doesn't like to hear that? Great. There's definitely some great ones coming in. Fun facts so they don't think it's all work, no play. Reaching full potential. I see how the process works again. Great. There's definitely a lot of feedback in here. I think we could all relate to this feedback. So what we'll do is end this. Thank you for participating in the poll. If you would like to continue to provide feedback, feel free in the chat room as well. But we will close this poll. And I think it would be great to transition to our panel discussion. And let's jump into the discussion with our panelists, because I know that they all bring a wealth of knowledge from their life and personal experience, program experience. And to kick off our conversation, I just asked VR staff and those who are attending this webinar, what do they wish Opportunity Youth knew? And I want to ask a very similar question from your perspective, because some things may align with what we already heard, and you may bring to light a few other things that we could further discuss and definitely continue to explore beyond this webinar. So what do you wish employers or VR agencies knew about Opportunity Youth? And Wade, can you kick us off with your input?
Absolutely. Well, I feel like it would be very beneficial for them to know that there's a middle group in schools and in the Opportunity Youth. It's not always mainstream, and it's not always, special education or assistance ed. There's that specific group, like I was one. I couldn't really cut it in mainstream, but I didn't require, a load of assistance in special education. I tested out 100%, but I didn't have the organization or the skills necessary to complete my homework in a timely fashion. And I noticed that, and me personally, that brings a lot of chances for error and chances for mistakes in life, and without that assistance. So I feel like having that middle group be acknowledged is a good thing. Another thing is, a lot of times I know I've worked with MRS and now Right Turn, and a lot of these programs are very helpful, but not all of them go about it the right way. With an opportunistic youth, I personally like to be approachable and personable while also being professional. And I know there's a lot of chances for that personable aspect to be a little more in-depth. Also, not a lot of opportunistic youth have reliable transportation, or they don't feel comfortable outside of their home or known environment. The ability to meet them where
Definitely.
they're comfortable.
Thank you for kicking us off, Wade. And before I provide feedback on that, I did see a few things in the chat. I apologize. I should have spelled out OY. OY stands for Opportunity Youth. And also, Wade mentioned MRS, and I believe you are referring to Michigan Rehabilitative Services. And I think you brought up 3 great points from don't leave out the middleman phrase. There is young people that will fall through the gaps if we are leaving out the middle man, the youth that are potentially out of school and out of education. And I definitely think you gave some other great input. And Josh, what are your thoughts? What do you wish that employers or VR agencies knew about Opportunity Youth?
I have no clue.
Or how do you think that some employers could help some of your friends that, like you've gotten help from Oasis?
It's okay. It's okay. We'll come back to you if you have any feedback. And definitely if there's any time during this conversation, because I really want this to be a conversation, feel free to add your input. And so, Chuck, could you tell us what's on your wish list for employers and VR agencies to know about Opportunity Youth?
Yeah, mine would be just that, just for the employers to recognize that every city, every community, every person has different obstacles that they have to address, and really educating themselves is the key as far as utilizing different or knowing about different organizations in their city that already deal with Opportunity Youth, to see how they could tap into that. I'm biased because I'm here at Oasis, but there's 20 other programs here at Oasis that deal with different demographics of youth. And so places like this and Monroe Harding and other places, pretty easy if an employer was to Google or search in town or talk to different community leaders to see what's going on. And then it's just up to them to tap into those organizations and either talk to people or engage
Definitely.
in workshops.
So to recap what you were saying, that
you
wish that employers would look into, different youth service programs that provide all these opportunities and resources and support because it's there and it's readily available. Do you have an example of a partnership with an employer that works really well that you can share with us? Chuck? Mm-hmm. Yes, sorry.
Are you me or Elizabeth? Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Josh just had to step out to speak to somebody, a personal matter real quick. He'll be right back. Yeah, education with employer. It's we just started something with a really big electric company that works with a lot of businesses in the city, and so working on getting specific internships and just teaching them about not only the Oasis Transitions Program, the Right Turn Program, but all the other programs that are involved with Oasis, and really bridging that gap, having a lot of staff go visit their company and vice versa, have the company come here and tour the entire building to just see what spots are being missed on the obvious connections that each of us bring to the table, and there's always more opportunities to connect and hopefully just kind of brainstorm on the spot as well as far as future employment connections that we can do within them. And then it also, you know, if there's something that doesn't align with that particular electrical company, I know that one internship that we started, you have to have a high school diploma, and several of our opportunity youth do not. So it's them bringing us ideas and other connections to the table, whether it's within their company or somebody that they know of that's similar in that similar field that was already of interest to the
Thank you.
opportunity youth.
And Elizabeth, do you have any additional
connections,
thoughts about what do you wish employers or VA agencies knew about Opportunity Youth?
Yeah, so I think everyone's brought up some really good points. I think that it's important for employers and VR agencies to know that Opportunity Youth do have goals. They might not always know where to go and how to get assistance or ask for assistance. And so kind of like what Wade touched on, I think it's important for these VR agencies to go out into the community and make their presence known more to these youth. A lot of the youth that we work with have barriers, whether it's barriers for transportation, any sort of other barriers that they may be dealing with, and some of those they don't speak about, but they're there. And that can sometimes make it look like they don't always want to follow through, or they're not interested in getting the help, when really that's not the case. These barriers just sometimes make it more difficult for them to be able to ask for services or to get to where the services are to be able to receive those services. So the biggest thing, I think, is just meeting them where they're at, going out into the community, maybe providing transportation, whether that's a bus token or just meeting them out in the community. That might make them more accessible for Opportunity Youth to get assistance.
Can I say? Oh, sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, speak about him while he's not in the room for a second, but you know, that's another thing that we all deal with on everyday situations with our Opportunity Youth is that, you know, Josh is on the phone with a PO, and he wouldn't mind me telling you that, but also it's just things that come up organic, just on that particular day, and dramas that we all go through, and how you deal with that. So again, it's one thing to you saw he excused himself and then walked out, and he's going to deal with it, and he's going to come back, and then we all deal with whatever situation comes. So it's never exactly how we plan it, whether it's the audio disconnect in this or coming in and out, and we just all do the best we can.
And Elizabeth, I definitely agree. Sometimes we just don't know what the barriers or challenges are, and it might be because we haven't established that real connection, that deeper relationship to access that information. And I think that's why it's so important as a service provider to do a really thorough assessment in the very beginning of intake, which I believe many of you do, and doing check-ins, not just check-ins on your progress towards employment or your career goals, but checking in on seeing how the individual is doing, checking in to see how I could be there to be a support. And I think it opens up conversations that will allow a young person to really dive deeper in being transparent and helping them thrive. So, you know, we just started talking about partnerships as well, and I think someone in the chat asked if do we have any dealings with apprenticeships with our programs, and we definitely do. Many of our right-term programs have pre-apprenticeship in-house trainings or partner with the community for pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships, and we could dive deeper into that, maybe even with when we talk about collaborative partnerships. So here, let's just chat real quick about collaborative partnership approach. I think it's really key to cross-collaborate and foster a relational partnership versus transactional, and we heard Hassan bring this up even during his open plenary. And not only is collaboration important, but it can lead to desired outcomes for young people from their education to careers and adult life. Even if it can establish relationships that are ongoing long-term versus short-term, we can see a tremendous outcome for youth through mutual agreements that will enhance the quality of services while improving those skills that are critical to success in the workplace, definitely. And here are just some examples of, what I'm talking about when it comes to transactional versus relational. Transactional is very short term. It's all about what you need and what you want to get out of it, what you would like to request, and it's very, specific to one goal. And, with relational, it's just there's so many more benefits to it. It's ongoing, it's long-term, it's what you give versus what you get. It's collaborative. You don't want to just commit to just one event, but you want to have a series of events so it could flourish into progression and growth over time for both you and your partner. And this is just an example of, with a transactional partnership, a goal could be to recruit and enroll opportunity youth or any young person. But if you had a relational partnership, there are so many mutual benefits from providing dual service support, such as transportation, education services, job coaching. There's supported employment services, and providing employer needs. And one that specifically I want to highlight is that also collaborating with our young people, that is a relational partnership that we want to really establish. Because if you are doing, if a young person is really doing well in a program, it really might be because the service provider is providing a really great relational, fostering relational relationship. And that can turn into peer-to-peer referrals, that turns into recruitment opportunities, that turns into enrollment. So just keep that in mind. So Elizabeth and Chuck, what would you say are one or two strategies on how to effectively collaborate with community agencies? Maybe provide examples of a community agency that you partner with that exists now or in the past, and how you approach that partnership, and how has it become a mutual benefit collaboration. Elizabeth, will you kick us off?
Yeah, so with the Right Turn program here in Lansing, we partner with quite a few community agencies. For example, we partner with probation and parole. So we get referrals from probation and parole agencies. They have youth that are on their caseload, and they have expectations that they have of their youth, and we can help provide supportive services such as employment, creating resumes, helping them stay on the right track. So building that mutual relationship with them. They refer clients to us. We can help that youth and then also help their caseload while we're working with them. But a really good example I wanted to touch on is our local One Stop. So here in Michigan, we have what's called Michigan Works. And it is an agency that is dedicated to helping with training and employment for anybody in the community. Anyone can go there. So for the Right Turn program, we partner with our local One Stop Michigan Works to provide training opportunities. So a lot of our young people are looking for jobs and looking for trainings and looking more for a career than just a part-time job. They want to start thinking more long-term. And so we partner with Michigan Works. They have the training funds to be able to provide for our youth, and then we can provide the supportive services. So for example, I have a young man who wants to go and get his CDL. He wants to become a truck driver. And so I took him up to the Michigan Works office. We sat down with a case manager through their program, and he's going to be starting a CDL-sponsored program through them, and our local One Stop is going to be paying for it. Now, if he needs any work clothes, when he needs to go and get his permit, if he needs anything for the job, we're able to help him with that. And so our two agencies are working together to be able to help this young man out. And that's just one example of an agency that we partner often with.
Thank you. And Chuck,
other ones are alternative schools in the community
of a community
and things
partnership?
of that nature.
Yeah, I'll tell you one that we did last year and then one that we're about to begin. Last year, kind of like the word of mouth through alumni or program participants that we know of and meeting them where they're at or where their transportation issues aren't necessarily addressed to come to us. We set up kind of like a regular week, bi-monthly session at a neighborhood center that several of our youth live near. And so basically it was a center where they had a professional music studio. It was semi-professional. It was makeshift music professional, but there was a community mentor that was there, and they came there after school or in a certain time, and then we would meet them, and they had another, like a community room where we would help them and other people that weren't even in our program, whether there's younger in age or the same age, with homework with school and getting back in school and GED stuff. And so just that consistency and meeting them where they're at and kind of mentorship, and then having word of mouth, having them spread it to other people in the community and beyond, to that, this program is legit and it's not here just for the money or giving money, and making sure that we met some of their other basic needs as well. And then starting at the end of this month, it's been a year in the making with a local judge, but she's made us the lead organization with several other organizations that are going to be involved for a very unique diversionary program, as far as like kind of making it a choice for them to either be accountable to, if it's a good fit, to enroll in our program and to get in workforce development, versus spending minimal time in jail or other disciplinary things, depending on their court cases and stuff. So it's something that she's developed and put the program together for about a year, this particular judge, and it has particular grants and other things involved, and she's ready to hit the ground running with us as a lead organization, and hopefully if it goes well, it'll be something that will continue in a national spotlight. So just trying new ideas with the legal system and what the system is and what actually works, and then pairing up with organizations that all have the right turn locations, and just seeing what they do.
Something we talked about personally is that you connect some of your young people through Right Turn, connect them to VR agencies in your community. Can you talk about a specific example, Chuck?
Yeah, with the VR relationship, we just started that with Thomas, who did not come here today, but he went last Friday. I'm still yet to connect with him for an official kind of orientation with them and really start the program. We had a job fair at our location probably about a month and a half ago, before the holidays, and one of the employees at the local VR was here, and Thomas happened to come in that day, so we paired them up, and then they exchanged information, and they really hit the ground running last Friday. But like I said, I wish he was here to connect and to give us an update, but we will be updating that in our files this week and seeing what the next steps are for Thomas. But
so it sounds like a VR agency was at a local job fair, or a job fair you might have been hosting, and I think that would be a great opportunity if you could go out in the field and identify job fairs, even at your local one-stop, to attend, to connect to other youth-serving organizations who specifically even serve older youth, the more challenging young people to recruit and find, is a great opportunity. Well, thank you. And I think someone in the chat mentioned something about where can I find opportunity youth, or I need to find more information about programs in my area that serve opportunity youth. And one point I want to bring up to that is, one suggestion is to do some community mapping on your own to identify the youth-serving organizations in the age range that you specifically want to look for, and identify those youth-serving organizations, and then from there, connecting, establishing those relationships. And there's so many ways to do that, from doing informational sessions, meetups, joining program organization networks to connect with other programs. So I definitely think community mapping really is helpful. Thank you for that feedback. All right, so let me ask Wade, what was helpful for you to follow through with enrollment process into a program? Now, enrollment oh, go ahead.
I have.
No problem. You guys can take a moment.
Sorry, our lights turned off. I apologize.
So Wade, you know, recruitment enrollment is a challenging task for many organizations, especially for out-of-school youth. So it'd be great to hear from you, from your perspective, being in a program, some things that we can learn from you about how you got connected. Let's start there. How did you get connected to Right Turn or any other youth program?
When I was incarcerated, Right Turn made a program in the jail that I was at to actually meet with the opportunistic youth in the jailhouse system. And they really targeted people with judicial involvement. You know, they were really open and accepting, easy to communicate with. Probably the thing that I like most with my disability, I don't really like to be looked down on. And I feel like Right Turn did an exceptional job of, you know, treating me as an equal while also providing that, you know, above equal support. It was like I said earlier, it was very well done in terms of being personable and professional. I think Elizabeth here had done an exceptional job herself.
Definitely,
as well
thank
as
you. So it sounds like
honestly, I couldn't
the
give
program
them
you're in,
enough
Right Turn, they met you at a jail facility, a county jail, I believe. And, you know, maybe, I think there was a question early on. Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
Yep, Ingham County, they really made an effort to meet me in the community. Like if I hadn't had them come to that environment and me see it through the jail system, I would have never known they existed. You know, they really, you know, by doing that program, they made it known to me, and then by me knowing about it, I've talked to other people in the community about it. I believe Chuck had mentioned word of mouth and the power of that in the environment of VR and opportunistic youth. And I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, you know, you don't have to have an opportunistic youth learn about it for them to be brought to you.
Thank you, Wade.
Really nice to have
yeah, and I think
people
someone
know.
earlier in the chat asked about, you know, it is a challenge to get into facilities. And I don't know if there's anything you two could share after we go through these questions with Wade about how you built that trust and access to get into facilities or detention centers or even mental health facilities. So I'll come back to that question. So Wade, what motivated you to stay engaged in the program? So sounded like that personable relationship building during the intake process, you know, once they connected with you in jail was really helpful. But what motivated you to stay pretty engaged in the program?
You know, that's actually, it's kind of funny. I personally, I tend to have problems being proactive and, you know, disciplined. I tend to push things off a lot, and I don't always stay actively involved in things that I start. It's one of the things I work on. I'd have to say what really got me involved in, like, actually doing it was them not giving up. You know, they kept on reaching out. They kept on being like, you know, they weren't pushy, but they also weren't distant. They weren't waiting for me to come to them. They really made an effort to, you know, connect with me. And I think, you know, probably by the third text or phone call, I was finally like, you know what, I really do need to do this. And that's when, you know, I really got started in it and active in it. They didn't, you know, even though I had a lot going on, they weren't just pushovers, and they didn't just give up. They really made an effort to connect with me individually. And I know I've seen in the chat group a lot of people say, you know, individualized plans and people that work for you and not, you know, a whole group.
You definitely, you know, put that in a great overview, so thank you. And Elizabeth, can you share how you guys got established in a jail facility or any type of facility?
Yeah, so the Right Turn program, this is the third phase of it, but we've had the Right Turn program in Lansing for quite a few years now. And over those years, we have built a strong relationship with law enforcement in the community and probation, parole, whether that be juvenile or adult. And so already kind of having that presence known in the community was helpful, I think, for us. But then we just reached out to the Ingham County Jail, provided them with some information about our program and asked to set up a meeting. They have a GED program that's run out of our jail regularly, so we reached out to the programs coordinator in the education center there, as well as the deputy in charge of the jail, just seeing if this was something that maybe we could start implementing and telling them about what our program has to offer and how we could help some of the youth that are incarcerated there. And so just setting up that meeting, I think we had 2 face-to-face meetings and then a couple email and phone call exchanges. And shortly after that, we were running a 4-week group out of their jail once a week. And throughout that, we would have about 5 to 6 youth in the class at a time, and we would go over some soft skills things. We would go over employability skills, values, and really getting the youth to think about what's important to them, and some cognitive behavioral therapy, things like that, to get them really starting to think about what they want for their future and how they can kind of start achieving that and going towards that. And then we talked about what our program had to offer and encouraged them to reach out once they did get out, and then we also got contact information for them. So the jail would let us know when those individuals were released who had been in our group, and then if they hadn't reached out within a week, we would reach out to them and really encourage them to come on up.
And is something you'd like to add,
we could start
Chuck?
working with them. So it's been a really cool partnership that we've had.
Yeah, very similar story as far as that, because Oasis has been around for 50 years, so the community spotlight's already there, and the quality that they know they're going to get is already there. But the same way, we just started a new relationship with a jail here in town last year, and just through the wormhole of trying to find people with different charges, and it led us to this one, and where they're coming out in 60 days or less. And so it gives us the opportunity of not just waiting for when somebody's out, but having cohorts inside the jail to let them know it's not just about enrollment. It's not about just when they're getting out, it's what we get, but it's just building that relational thing that you mentioned earlier, and that's what's important. And a lot of stuff won't show up on stats or just a case note, but that's the most important thing that we can actually do in their time of need. Like Wade said, I noticed on the chat, one lady said that it was hard to build those kind of relationships in schools, and we used to work with youth younger than this that were still in high school a lot, and that was hard. But you just have to make those interpersonal relationships with the teachers or the guidance counselors or the people in the trenches just as much as the people that we've met, Elizabeth and our group have met within the jails that are in the trenches in those spots, and really care for those people. It doesn't matter about charges. We're all the same. And so everybody's trying to help everybody else in whatever job they are. It's just making that personal connection and seeing how we can work together to help everybody have more opportunities.
And so I want to thank our panelists for responding to several questions and providing advice. So I'd like to open up for the next few minutes, about 10 minutes or so, to questions. Please include your questions in the chat, and I will try to get through as many as possible. And if there's someone you directly want to respond to your question, please try to add their name as well. And I think someone asked, how are we funded? Let me see. Awesome. What funding source did you use for this? Grants or state funding? This is federal funding from Department of Labor, Employment and Training. And if there's any additional funding that you guys have access to, feel free to respond to that question. Okay, so Wade has a few responses responses to comments in the chat you would like to touch on. Do you want to touch on them real quick, Wade?
Absolutely. So I know Elizabeth Bull made a really good comment in there about Plan 504 and IEP students being missed in school systems. And I don't know, that pertains a little bit, and as well as Lauren and Diane put in that they forget 504, Plan 504 isn't always as accepted. Me personally, in my own experience, I started off with a Plan 504. It took years for my parents just to get the information to achieve those plans. It wasn't, my parents went in for it and they asked, what do you want from this? And they're like, we don't know, that's why we're doing this. So not always do the students have those plans to begin with. Plan 504, I believe, is a more directed towards that middle ground. But I think a better way to reach the OY people and students is not to focus so much on those plans, but to have a collaboration with the individual school systems. I know mine had a program called STARS that you didn't have to have any one of these plans. It was just, people who need assistance in certain areas that enroll in this program. It was like a volunteer program for the honor students to help other students. And I feel like, if you collaborate with schools in that way, you can really target more of the opportunistic youth than focusing on the Plan 504 and the
go ahead,
IEP
Chuck. I want to get to some of these questions as well.
That's all I had.
How do you involve families and support systems in your efforts? Chuck, would you like to answer that? Or Elizabeth?
Yes, sure. We with our different programs, we have our calendar full of, and we have space to invite different parents and or extended family to different events within our program and other programs, depending on confidentiality of some of the younger programs. But I was just reading along some of the chat as well, where it's going back to the school systems, but it's the same thing about sharing just stories, and a lot of times we get hung up on the negative ones, but it's just as important, like Jason was saying in there, to share the positive ones, especially in the school, because like some of the programs that we have here, whether it's Oasis Transitions or some of the other ones where it's like a two-week respite with families, you may not see that breakthrough or on the spot while you're there, but then you hear about it later, or they come back and they tell you these things. So it's important to share with the teachers, the counselors, and the other employers or VR people in your city about the success stories that aren't necessarily on the monthly brochures or the website for grant purposes or just for the sake of getting it out there. It's just that, again, it's the word of mouth works both ways, and then the negative and the positive. And I feel like even from the youth or the staff, the positive word of mouth just keeps the wave going and positivity and for future possibilities for not only future grants, the grants that are still ongoing, and or just the need that this is all stuff that's not going to be solved and ended in one day, kind of like.
So does anyone, one of the concerns that I'm sure many people agree with is that VR workers have high caseloads, so there's a lot on their plate already. Do any one of you have a suggestion on how to establish relationships while being able to maintain your expectations of your caseload? Elizabeth?
Yeah, I can kind of try to touch on that. So in positions that I've had crazy high caseloads before too, and it can be very challenging, not only doing like the paperwork aspect of it and in addition to the case management, but then also making each client feel like they're not just part of your caseload, but that you actually care and you really want to help them. When you do, there can just be a lot of other demands in that. I think it's really important to just make it a point every week, every month, whatever you feel that you can commit to really reach out to that person, your client, and just see, hey, how's it going? Is there anything that you need from me? Are you able to meet up anytime soon? Just anything like that. Is there anything that I can help you with? Like Wade touched on, there are things always going on, but being able to have somebody like, okay, they actually do care about me. They aren't going to go away. Maybe they actually could help me, and maybe I should respond and really see if they could provide me with some help in any way. Just being able to kind of reach out and really just see, hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can help you with? That doesn't take a long time. That's not a 10-minute conversation. But then that opens the door for that communication.
Another question,
and then
how do you get employers to be more open in working with VR agencies or other youth service programs to provide opportunities for opportunity youth? If you could give one example of how you have accomplished that, that would be great. Chuck, do you have an example? How do you get employers to be more open in working with organizations to provide opportunities for opportunity youth? And opportunities could be maybe work placement, work experiences, on-the-job training.
I think it's just, I mean, some of it's connecting the right fit, but more importantly, it's like I find myself lately talking to the youth, talking about job interviews and the employers, so the opposite of what you're asking, but in a relationship that, like dating, I mean, it's just kind of that thing where you just be honest and open and transparent of what you're wanting, what's going on, what's troubles are going on your way, and the employers, if you've got the right fit, will understand that from the get-go. There may be some hurdles and some hiccups with particular youth or even the employer trying to figure out whatever they're wanting to be done. But it's just the communication, being honest and open and consistent, and not letting emotion get out of the way. And if a youth doesn't show up for these things, just trying to salvage that relationship with the employer for the next youth that may have adversity but may need it. And so, again, just staying open, honest, and consistent. That's all you can do, and things are going to happen.
I believe Nancy had a clarification from her question earlier about how are we funded through the prison system. It sounds like she wanted clarification on if a company such as VR wanted to connect with local prison systems, what types of funding sources they should pursue for that. And I think it's not necessarily always about the funding, but what services can you offer and establish within the prison system that is needed. But if coming to funding, I'm assuming county is one way to access funding to provide services in a prison system. Do you guys have any other ideas or suggestions? Chuck, did you have something to say?
No, I think as far as working with the jail, it's going to be different in every facility just as much as it is with the different employers. So it all comes down to those relationships and then what they can do if they trust you and want to work with you more. So it's less about grants and more about just time and energy and the relationship that you put into it. I mean, an example is that the last cohort we had, they were wanting food and different things, and we just asked what we could bring in, and so there were stipulations of what could be brought in and this and that, but we gave them a list of what we had and what we could bring, and then screened it to come through, and then everybody's happy with something is better than nothing all around, and it shows that we're making an extra effort, but at the same time, those people that are employed there want to stick to the rules.
I'm not too familiar with the history of Peckham, of how they've been able to contract with the local juvenile justice system, for instance. But if you have anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
There's a different program run out of our youth services department that is in collaboration with the juvenile court, and it's actually funded by a millage. So people within Ingham County vote, and there's a juvenile justice millage that's been passed for a number of years recently, and so that funds one of the programs that run here. We collaborate with an alternative school within the Lansing community, and there's probation officers at the school. It's completely alternative. And so those youth go to school for half the day, and then they come over to Peckham, and they get work experience while they're here. And so they're getting paid while they're here at Peckham. They have to pass a drug screen while they're here in order to be able to work, and they're also getting credit for school for being here. So that's just one example of another way of funding. But otherwise, I agree with what Chuck said, just building those relationships. Even if we were not a grant-funded program, if we just wanted to go into the jail and host a group like that, I think just setting up those meetings, starting the communication, and building those connections within the community, I think that you could actually do a lot with that without even having any funds.
In the same regard, we had to go through a volunteer orientation to get in.
So we are at the end of our panel session, and I really appreciate all of you participating today. And before I transition back to Alicia, Janelle had a question for Wade if you want to respond in the comments. She said that it sounds like it's important to you that the service providers come to you in the community. So if you were required to come to an office to get services, do you think you would have followed through? So if you'd like to provide some feedback in the chat, feel free to do that, Wade. And thank you. Alicia, I'll hand it back to you.
Absolutely.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Francine, Elizabeth, Wade, and Chuck. We thank you for helping to just shed some light on some really critical issues, not just for the VR community, but for Opportunity Youth as well. And so we're going to take a little bit of a break. We know that we've hit you all with a lot of information, but we thank you for hanging in there because, as you've heard, there are just some really amazing stories that needed to be shared, but also some helpful insights that we think or that we hope will help each of you to strengthen the work that you're already, the hard work that you're already doing with the youth that you support. So with that, I'd like to ask that everyone take a moment to fill out the evaluation for this first panel. Something just happened to my screen, so I'm going to see if I can just get that back up here. It should come up. So if you can just follow the question prompts that everyone should now see on their screen. It'll take, I think, about 2 minutes or so to do that survey, and then we'll reconvene at about 3:25. So don't go too far. Maybe take a quick bathroom break and then come on back for our final panel session of the day, which is going to be about recognizing the diverse needs of Opportunity Youth and effective trauma-informed practices that can be used to support them. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Who is that?
So I see Carolyn is here. I'm not sure if she's connected yet.
I know she's been listening, and she could see. She may need to unmute.
Wanted to let you know I'm here.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, guys, for joining on webcam. So, Carolyn, I think that was you. You sounded pretty clear to me.
Adine, can you say something? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
That was actually Kim earlier, Rachel, so we haven't heard from Carrie Lynn yet.
Okay. Carolyn, can you go ahead and say something so we can just check your audio? So I'm not sure that Carrie Lynn can hear us.
Hey, Rachel.
Oh, hi. Can you say a little more?
It's Carly, and we're just getting the webcam set up.
Okay. Thanks, Anthea. So, Karen, I'm not sure if you have Carrie Lynn's number so that you can text her and just ask her if she can hear us, because I think she cannot.
Yes, I do. I'll text her right now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can hear
heard
you.
that.
My
Can you hear us? Can you see
No,
my
there's
lips
no
moving?
echo.
Oh, good. Okay. Maybe just a little bit delayed, but we can hear you.
So Anthea is working with Carly
So
to
now
get
we just
Christopher
need our
set up,
Christopher
so they
and
are
Karen.
looking to join us very soon.
It's normal.
Okay. That's really choppy, Carrie Lynn.
Hi, this is Carly and Christopher and Karen, not
Yes,
to
we
be
can
confused
hear
with
you.
Karen Grandin. Can you hear us? Okay. Great. So
We can hear
I'm
you.
just waiting. Hopefully it'll be one more minute. Somerset is, that's our tech company, is in my computer right now fixing my webcam. And we should be ready to go, I hope. Christopher and Karen, could you hello? We can check that we can hear you.
Hello?
Hey, this is Karen. Hello, this is Karen.
Hi, Christopher.
Can you hear them?
Hello, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Yes.
And then Adine and Carrie Lynn can. Okay, can you
We
both
can
of you
hear
just say
you.
hello so I can make sure I can hear you besides Karen Grandin?
Yeah, the chat only hear bits and pieces.
Adine and Carrie Lynn, can you say hello?
Oh no, I just wanted to make sure we could hear you guys. We're not using our computer speakers, we're using the phone.
Hello.
So Carrie Lynn, can you just give us a quick hello?
Bazan and David.
Carolyn, if you can hear, your.
I can't hear
Karen,
Carrie
can you
Lynn
hear me?
just quite yet. We'll work on that.
Okay, great. Carolyn, your microphone is a bit choppy, so what we're going to do is Alicia will email you a dial-in number so that you can dial in directly.
Oh, perfect. here we are. Here's our webcam. Okay, this is the view we're gonna have. And I'm gonna hit start sharing. Can you guys see? Looking good? Okay, good angles. We can't see you. There we go. Awesome. I'm gonna see if I can change my name. Hi.
Yay!
Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
What is our ending time now? Are we ending at a different time? Just so that I can keep my eye on it.
That's a good question.
I think our audio is a little delayed.
I think we're going to try to make up a little bit of time, so if
Anthea
you all
or
could
Rachel,
wrap
can
up
you
by
tell us what time we should be
4:45,
ending?
that'd be great. And once we get Carrie Lynn dialed into the phone, then we can begin this session.
So 4:45. And Carrie Lynn, can you all hear me? It's Alicia. And we're
When you guys weren't talking, just in case.
okay, great. Carrie Lynn, I just
starting at what time?
emailed
3:25?
the phone number and the code to you. But let me know if you want to just take it. I can also read it to you right now. So excited to see you, Christopher and Karen. Carrie Lynn, I don't know if you can still hear me, but I put
And I'm not sure.
in the presenter chat window, I put the dial-in number and the code.
Can you hear me now?
Carrie Lynn, can you try to speak again?
Hi, Carrie Lynn. We can hear you. Hi, Carrie Lynn. We can hear you.
So I'm going to hang up or
Okay,
take
yeah.
off this
If you
computer.
can mute your computer speakers. And Karen, you can go until 4:50. And Carrie Lynn, are you still with us? No, you're
Am I
not.
echoing now? Hello?
Is this Carrie Lynn? You're not echoing, but we can't see your camera anymore.
Oh, I turned that off because I was echoing when I had that on.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Karen? Yes, she can join again, get into the room again. I'll promote her to presenter, and then she can turn her webcam on. She just shouldn't join via the microphone, and she should keep her computer speakers muted so that she's not getting the sound from the phone and her computer. Correct.
We can hear you. We can't see you.
I think if you're...
So the minute she gets on webcam, Karen, take it away.
You can wrap up by, wrap up by 4:50, right, Rachel? Or like end by 4:50. So so Karen, you're going to want to leave a little bit time before 4:50, for questions and stuff like that. But, and then I'll come back on to do the evaluation and closing remarks.
Right.
All right, we ready?
So can Carrie Lynn have her camera on and just
Can I?
turn the sound off of the computer? Can Carrie Lynn have her sound off but have her webcam on? But use so she would use the phone as her audio and the computer as her video. That work, Carrie Lynn? So to confirm, we're going to go for an hour and 30 minutes still. I'm going to take that as a yes. Right. Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everybody, from your break. I'm hoping that you had a chance to relax for a little bit or hit the restroom. get some caffeine to carry you through the rest of the afternoon. I am Karen Grandin, and I'm going to be your moderator for your last session of today's virtual convening. I am a technical assistance liaison with the Youth Technical Assistance Center, which is housed at IEL. You've heard that acronym earlier, or the Institute for Educational Leadership. And just really quickly, my background is from the VR world, well, initially from the education world, where I was an elementary school teacher and did some special education as well, and then moved into counseling in the VR state agency, and then had various other positions there before I retired, and now I'm working for the YTAC. So we are going to be talking about, of course, young people and youth voice, but the subject of this session is recognizing the diverse needs of opportunity youth and looking at effective trauma-informed practices to serve them. So you got a few instructions earlier during this session and the opening, and so your microphones will be muted during this session, but we encourage you to post, and I saw that during Francine's panel, the attendees were very engaged. There was a lot of communication going back and forth and some really good questions. So please keep that up and write your questions as you think of them, and we'll try to monitor them. We will be monitoring them. We have my coworker Kim Osmani, who is going to, towards the end of the session, help with looking at some of the questions and sort of moderating that part of our meeting. So if you hear a voice coming out of the middle of nowhere and you don't see that person, you're not hearing voices, that's Kim. So you're also going to have a poll during this session. It'll be similar to what you experienced in the other two sessions, so be prepared for that. We'll walk you through it when it comes. And I have some fabulous
All right, so the challenge program is essentially what you see on the slide here. Our goal is to intervene in the lives of at-risk youth.
You heard earlier that each of our panels have young people,
emotionally, socially, and to provide them the skill sets so that they can go out and be productive citizens.
So
they
I'm
do that
going
in
to,
5.5 months. We provide them the skill sets in a residential phase here at the Academy, and then we follow them in a 12-month phase, which is called our post-residential phase, to make sure that they're either employed
talk a little bit
at a
about
school, 4-year school,
how
or in the
this
military,
session came about,
because they are our future. So we wanted to make sure that these young folks are also all volunteering to come to our program because they want to change their lives to better their future.
Session. So this slide that I'm showing now has a picture of several young people that have been engaged with our Youth Technical Assistance Center when we have done what we call a learning lab. And the Learning Lab is a model that engages young people like we're doing today with our panelists in discussions with professionals and adults to help us identify ways to work better and do better by the young people that we serve, and to give them a voice. So that's what we mean when we're talking about youth voice. So these are some of the young folks who have inspired me. And really quickly, I want to share a story of a reminder, and one of the things that really impressed upon me the importance of youth voice in my work, and it's an experience that I had while I was volunteering at a community food
it was a 5.5-month program from July
Actually, we have a very large,
13th,
what we like to call a compound here in
5.5 months.
Phoenix, Arizona, where I live. And we do a really good job of providing services to individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And one day, we typically have 600 meals that we serve per breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And occasionally
I was also there till July 14th.
We have young people who come through that line. So when we see someone who looks like a young adult or a teen, we glom onto them right away and really try to get them hooked up with other resources. But I had a young fellow that I was working at his table cleaning up. After the meal, and I sometimes think I'm really witty. Usually I'm not. And was engaging him and talking with him, and I don't even remember what I said. I thought it was funny, and he clearly did not, and his reaction was a little aggressive to it. So I followed that with an apology and explaining that, you know,
my name is Aideen Carhan.
Sometimes I think I'm funny.
I started out my career
and what he said to me
in the field of foster care. So started out in case management.
Really
and,
stuck with me and
youth,
was sort of
families and recruited
a gut
families,
punch
and
for and
a working with
reminder for
adoption network,
why we're working with young people.
The adoption network for children in foster care who were available for adoption in Pennsylvania.
What he said was being homeless has made
so
me
that was kind of that started my love for working with youth.
My sense
and
of
since
humor.
then, I have become a mental health
and it was
clinician
just
and have continued while working at Cornell. I've
something that I've
been
shared
able to
frequently
with,
because
a project called Promise, which was a New York State project.
It motivates me
to
look
in the midst
at
of
and listen
graduating
to
and preparing for adult life.
And
so that was really exciting to me. It also opened up
about
my eyes a lot.
Young people and stepping into their shoes and what they're experiencing instead of assuming that I'm being clever or smart or know what's best for them. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about how we ended up with our panel today. I attended a conference in DC a couple of months ago where I saw Carrie Lynn, who is one of our panel members, and
all right, so I actually started this journey
in Wisconsin at the Wisconsin people Challenge who were Academy, involved in the National Guard
there,
Challenge
and then
program.
I came out to Maryland. I've had about 6 different positions here at the Challenge Academy.
They were such incredible speakers and so open about their experiences,
and now I'm the director
and in
of the
particular,
Academy, so I do a little bit of everything here, but most
shared
importantly, what I do
what
is
it was about
the
Challenge program,
to be successful citizens. Whatever that means,
that worked
I need to
for
be a
them.
teacher, a mentor,
My
counselor, mom, whatever it means to help them to be successful.
biggest question
That's
was,
the whole goal.
you know,
And then
you're
we
all
also make
telling
sure
us
that once
that
they
you
leave here, that we
didn't
provide
like
all the
school,
necessary things that they need to be successful. So if that means helping them
didn't
get
stay in
transportation,
school, were asked to leave
scholarship,
school, whatever the situation may
you know,
be,
helping them have, do the
and
resume,
yet
whatever they need to be
at
successful,
this
that's what we
conference,
do.
the same young people were saying they wanted to now go on to additional school, wanted to enter the military, wanted to pursue a career. And so I was impressed by the fact that their participation in this program really prompted them to have long-term goals and to be more
that was after my mom had passed away.
Confident in themselves.
And I realized
so that's how we ended up inviting
because
these
of
young
the things that were going on.
People and our panelists to join us today. And so I'm going to,
and after going through the program, benefited from it.
Ask Carrie Lynn to talk a little bit real quickly about this slide and just give us an overview of what the challenge program
after my mom had passed away, my grades like dramatically dropped
is,
and I wasn't like going to school. Well, I was going to school, but I would be waking up late because I would set my alarm, and then when my alarm would go off, I'd be like, okay, 5 more minutes, and then another 5 minutes, and it would go like that. So my grades would drop, and then the things that were going on were, well, my brother, he works a lot, so he wasn't really around, so I couldn't get the moral support that I needed. So I really had to deal with everything on my own.
As he said, I decided to enroll myself because I wasn't doing good in school either. I had recently just lost a family friend. So, like, I was doing really bad like that. Just, you know, I felt devastated at the fact that he had lost his life. So I fell into the wrong path. I was hanging with the wrong crowd, which, you know, they made me believe they were my friends.
Thank you so much. I knew you would say it better than I could, Carrie Lynn.
They led me to the wrong path, so I found this program because of a counselor.
So with that, we have our fabulous panel members. We have their
they want better for their kids. So I decided to go there.
Names listed here. Just for your reference, we've also, so you just met Carrie Lynn, who works with the Challenge program, and you'll get better introductions from them too. We've got Dean Carhan, who comes to us from the Cornell University, the Yang Tan Institute, and then we'll have the 3 young people. Actually, we've got 2 of the 3 with us today. Introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with the graduates, and at some point you're going to have to tell us why we have to call you. We don't have to. We're excited. We're thrilled to call you graduates. But I'm going to start with our young panel members, and maybe Christopher, could you tell us your name and your title?
I was always drawn to work with youth because I feel like it's always kind of invigorating.
I need to learn more about
I never really
how,
know.
I like how you address yourself.
Of youth just kind of giving it to you straight and having fresh perspectives and not just saying
when
things
you were
because
in
they're
the challenge
expected to be said.
program.
And so I really appreciate that. And I think in terms of opportunities,
And maybe
I
if
just
you
seen
attended
so
more
many
than
times
once, or
in the
if you
various
just
sectors that I've worked in, that there seems to be
one
a
time.
lack of support, and some of the things are, you know, if youth had different opportunities, then they would have been able to take different paths that maybe weren't available because they didn't know about them, or they just didn't have the right adults in their life who could kind of shepherd them along. And I hear Christopher and Karen talking about some things that are really traumatic experiences, and obviously they impact youth. And during those times, we all have times where we need.
Good for you. Well spoken, Christopher. I'm so excited to have you with us today. Okay, Miss Karen, how about you? I don't want to say name, rank, and serial number, but you know.
No, Wisconsin, the great state. Yes. Well, I most certainly wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the teachers that I had, a few of them that helped me to be successful. I didn't necessarily have the best childhood growing up. So I felt determined that I was going to be able to help others,
young people that we
because
met
others are who
at the
helped me
conference I was
be able to be where I am today. And I just wanted to be able to make an impact in others' lives because that's what happened to me. So that's what I was
done
determined to
partial
do for the rest of
completion
my
and
life.
then gone back. So it's helpful for us to know your experience. So thank you for that. I'm so excited to have you with us today. Okay, so we'll move on to our other panelists. Maybe we'll start with Jean, since we did hear a little bit from Carrie Lynn already. Name, rank, and serial number. And I want to thank you, Carrie Lynn, Adine. I definitely could not have done this, put this panel together without you. Adine is our go-to person when we're talking about trauma trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed care, and works with us at IEL in terms of developing trainings and working with our state VR agencies. So we'll talk more throughout our session too about the importance of trauma-informed care and how it relates to VR as well. So last but not least, absolutely, Ms. Carrie Lynn, would you mind telling us a little about yourself? Thank you. So you can see we have a very talented panel with us today. So we're going to move right into our first question for you all on the panel. And I think actually I'm going to start with Christopher. Could you tell us, Christopher, how you ended up at the challenge program? What made you decide that
I was looking at some literature. There's been a lot of research related to the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, which a lot of us know as the ACEs. And they've connected it to a lot of different psychological factors, health factors, lots of different things that impact individuals in society. And one of the areas that there hasn't been quite as much research, it's a little bit more difficult to find the direct impact on work. And so this cites some research and kind of shows you both sides of it. I think the first side that we want to be aware of as professionals is that work can be stressful. We all know that work is stressful, but in particular as a young person, any adolescent or young adult going into the workforce for the first time probably has a little bit of
Christopher,
feeling,
what do you mean by slacking in school and when you talk about
maybe
things
nervous about it, doesn't quite feel prepared. But if you're also coming with a history of trauma and
sharing that with us?
symptoms that resulted from that maybe there already was a history of anxiety related to the trauma. Maybe there are still some triggers that come about and you don't know when those triggers are going to happen and when they're not. That there can be even more difficulty with not just finding a job, but maintaining the job in the long term. And so we want to be realistic about the fact that we have to be doing some good planning. So if we know that we're working with a youth that has a history of trauma exposure, that we're just talking through, and it doesn't mean that they have to go into a lot of depth. We don't have to know, we don't have to play the role of the mental health counselor, and they shouldn't be expected to have to disclose a lot of confidential things. And I also recognize that being a VR counselor, that's not your role. Your role might be that maybe you could refer them to somebody within the community that they could receive mental health counseling from. But just in the present moment, being aware of the fact that there might be some unique things that they face that make employment even more difficult because of their history of trauma and adversity. Sometimes it's also called toxic stress.
Thank you for sharing that.
The accumulation of different things that youth come with. And we want to be problem solving about that. We want to be asking what we can do to support when it's,
Karen,
whether it's finding a job, what are they concerned about as they think about finding a job, what do their families
decided to go to join the
so that we
program?
can help to problem solve. A lot of us, when we entered the workforce, we had an adult to talk to, or several adults who we were able to talk about our feelings with and just talk about the benefits and the drawbacks about going to work and all those things, how to open a bank account. There are some youth that may be coming that maybe don't have all those supports in place. So I just think it's something that we need to be paying attention to, that we need to make sure there's proper supports and that there's some problem solving and that we've talked about those things that might come into play. But I also don't want to see the message sent that there's something harmful about working for people who have experienced adversity or that they're unable to work, because I have seen literature that has talked about just the resiliency factors, the protective factors that go along with working, the social connection that comes with it is tremendously healing. Having a schedule, having a routine, the improved self-esteem from realizing that you have these skills and strengths that you're able to offer the workforce. All those things can be really beneficial.
Are strong young people.
And once an individual is, once they've arranged the proper supports and maybe facilitated some relationships with a supervisor and have what they need to feel good and to feel safe about the place that they're working, they oftentimes can be a tremendous asset to the workforce. And what I've seen is that a lot of youth and young adults who have had experiences of adversity feel this draw to go into the helping services. And so they're
start with the dean. We just lost your audio, Adine. Thank you, and thank you for the recognition that there are some traumatic experiences, certainly, that young people go through, and we need to, that's what we're going to be talking about today, is ways to help them through that and to learn how to help them through it better. Carrie Lynn, how did you end up where you are? You started in Nebraska, you said? Wisconsin. And you have succeeded, it's obvious, Carrie Lynn. Just really quickly, I want to let folks know who are having audio difficulties that the tech people are working on that, and it looks like check for their responses in the chat box as well. Okay, so I don't want to distract from, so this is a pretty, this can be a heavy topic, and sometimes in the VR world, I know when I first started as a counselor, I wasn't aware of trauma-informed care. It wasn't a phrase that we acknowledged like we do now. But clearly people experience trauma. You've just heard about some situations that our panel members have lived through and the effect that it's had on their lives. And so we know then that many of the young people that we work with in the VR setting have experienced trauma or adverse childhood, have adverse childhood experiences.
I would say lit.
And so if we take a look at this slide, we know that sometimes that trauma response looks different with different folks. So it could be an emotional response, so you could see anger from a young person. Hassan spoke a little bit earlier about how his behavior in school, and I think many of us have experience with young people who sometimes it's much easier to tell the teacher to F off than to not be able to read what's up on the board when you're being asked, right? So it's easier to be the difficult student than for people to know that you're maybe not able to read what's on the board, whether it's because you can't see it or you have a learning disability. So things are demonstrated in different ways. Physically, when I was younger, I used to really get sick to my stomach, and that's a great way to get out of class because nobody wants you to be ill in class, right? You might see crying or uncooperative as what we hear a lot when we're talking about young people. They're being defiant. Or you may see some memory loss. So when you're in a stressful situation, you tend to forget things, and that's common in young people too. So they may be forgetful or have
we were just looking at the comments on the words, and we came
a really difficult time concentrating. And so if we think about trauma and the young people that we're serving in the VR space, we also need to think about maybe what some of those triggers are. Because what are we doing? We're trying to get them into work and careers, right? So it's all about
Did you have something to say?
Advancing their independence, but we need to be mindful that we're not setting them up in situations where there are triggers that are going to bring about some of those responses we just talked about. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that with our panelists as well. But these are just some common triggers. I'm sure people and feel free to list them if there's something unique that you want to share in the chat box. And this adult
I wanted to add in relation to the seating
and too, but we often attribute these
about yoga balls and things
to
like that.
young people.
Some of it is about comfort, but some of it is actually
we are
about
putting somebody
emotional
in a new
regulation,
job,
because individuals that have been exposed to trauma, one of the main
then
things
we can
that they
expect
have
if
trouble with
they've
that
experienced
affects
some trauma,
so many things in life,
that they
including
may
functioning at work, is the ability to regulate your body
have a
and your
difficult time with
emotions,
changes
and it's
that are
part of
happening
feeling
in that
unsafe,
setting,
because if
or
you
be
feel
embarrassed
unsafe,
that they don't
you're in
know
this
how
fight or flight, which causes a lot of physical
to do it right
reactions.
away. So,
and so
we need
what
to
they
keep all of
found is
those things
occupational
in mind.
therapy, the field of occupational therapy, has a lot to offer in terms of
Jane,
some
I'm
pretty
ask
easy things that you can provide that help
you to
with
talk a little bit about this
and things
slide,
like
because
yoga
you are
balls
our expert,
and other
you say it doesn't
that
sound
you can put
so
in your office. Don't take additional time that you have to spend with that person, but
data-driven.
they can go a long ways in terms of helping
more
to
the way we want it to be,
for
which
any
is
individual that comes in and might feel a little bit nervous about being in your office. So
the significance
it's something to
the
think
progress
about,
that's being
you know,
made.
beyond just basic like focus, because they're great for focus. There are things like fidget toys and little sandboxes to use while you're talking. I know there's a misconception that youth are not paying attention when they're not making eye contact, but there are a lot of individuals, including youth that have been traumatized and those that have ADHD. I have ADD. Open to some things that that are kind of they're seen, I think, as being not.
So basically what we do is we take the young folks out of their environment. We take away their TVs, their cell phones, everything that they have there away from their friends. So, and we put everyone in the same uniform. So they're away from all their distractions. Sometimes that does present problems because they do still have triggers when they're here, but it's very structured here. We don't necessarily change the environment here for like yoga balls, stuff like that. They do, their routine is when they wake up to when they go to bed, every minute of their day is planned for them. So it's just a continuous day pattern, doing everything that they need to do to get what they need to go out there and be successful. But as far as changing it, putting yoga balls out there, some of them we do provide stress balls too. If that helps them to be successful in the classroom, we will do that. But that's about as far as we go for that. Otherwise, they still are very successful with what they have. Unless, right, so they do physical fitness every day. So they do physical fitness every day, and they march from point A to point B from every single place that they go. So they're marching, they're doing physical activity all day. So some of them do, we don't do therapeutic counseling here, but they do have like group counseling, individual counseling, and they also have the ability to do like, I don't necessarily want to call it anger management class because that's not what we call it, but they have the ability to discuss some of those topics.
I remember, and sometimes there's typical work situations that that can be stressful, and they can put you in that fight or flight. And I remember working in a pizza shop that was supposed to be, they were a pizza shop. They were supposed to make pizza. There was a big 4th of July parade, and they ran out of cheese. And I was working at the register, and I had to be the person who had to greet the people who came to buy their pizza and say, I'm sorry, I can't sell you any pizza. Would you like a grill item? And it was tremendously, tremendously stressful. I think I was like 16 or 17. And so I was really, I had to stay and finish my shift. I think that the blessing in that was that it was 4th of July, and my family had driven to to see the parade and happened to be outside. They decided to sit outside where the pizza place was. So I was able to go out at a break and just kind of get that little bit of support and reinforcement that said, like, sometimes it's just somebody to say, like, oh.
Actually, the day I found out that my mom had passed away, I was in school, and it was during my last period, so I was getting checked out of school early. But during that process, I was listening to music, which really helped me cope. And then when my aunt picked me up, we went to the store to go get my favorite food so I could eat them. And
I want to
reminisce, I guess.
go to our chat box and say there's some great conversation going on here. And there it looks like folks are sharing some initiatives that they have in their area. And also I saw a comment that VR counselors may not have extensive training. So if you scan through this chat box, you'll see some
I have a lot of triggers. Like, you know, since I was young, I went through a lot of stuff.
Programs and some things, ideas that people are sharing with us. The other thing I would share with you,
or I play a sport, which is soccer, which helps me a
lot.
lot.
Doing things like attending this session are going to give you more information. We've got lots more. We've got recorded webinars, and we'll have more trainings by Adine. And I really encourage you to, if you feel that you need more exposure to working with young people who
well, I listen to hip-hop sometimes.
Have experienced adverse childhood experiences, that you talk with them.
Some hip-hop artists, or, well, I listen to Drake sometimes.
The young people. That's going to be our mantra
21 Savage.
Throughout this session and really the virtual convening is that we have to pay attention.
I listen to Drake as well. I listen to like The Weeknd or jazz music sometimes.
All right, so we're going to, here's your first poll. So you can start adding into your responses. The question is, please review the items and then select the top 2 skills you would most like to develop within your agency or yourself. So we know that when we saw the reasons why folks registered for this virtual convening is because they wanted to mostly learn how to do their job better.
Sorry about that.
So which of these things will help you?
I guess for a trauma response,
want to learn more about.
Considering I dealt with a lot of physical abuse
and
verbal abuse
safety,
when I was
both
a kid,
physical and emotional.
I try to look at why people do that now. So if I see someone speaking in that manner or doing those types of activities, I try to be helpful to those individuals to understand and
control.
So I can help those individuals with why they're doing
people
things
how to
that they're
do that
doing,
better,
rather than
how to collaborate better or share.
Because previously I used to get really
power and
defensive.
Equity, and
now
then
I just
empowerment.
Like to help the individual.
How to recognize strengths that young people have. It looks like that is the winner. So 70%, over 70% of the attendees would like to get more information on that. All right, thank you for sharing that. So I want to encourage you, if there's a specific question that and related to one of those categories that you want to ask our panelists, make sure that you add it to our chat box because we want you to get what you need out of today's session. And thank you also. It looks like if you weren't able to add to the poll, you can certainly put your comments in the chat box. Okay, so we're talking about strategies for
Yeah, that was something I actually used a lot and used with
providing trauma-informed services to young people, right? And there are a couple of
that are pretty basic that can just be photocopied.
Really discreet things that you can do.
On them, but it really can be an index card, but something where they've thought ahead. Here are the things that help me feel better.
Can create handouts that are
really good,
that young people.
Some really good resources online. There's one that I found. I think it was
can take with them that are
young. Teachers pay teachers, and it's pictures. They're photo cards of different regulating activities, and you can photocopy them. You can laminate them and things like that. And
put things in writing for those young people who prefer that, so that they know what to expect.
Hanging upside down is really regulating.
And they have reminders to take home. We all need that.
There are young adults who will go and do things where they can intentionally
packets of information are always helpful.
The rocking motion, and there's a lot of OT
just
behind it.
Verbally giving
about why that is. We all have different things that help to regulate us, but I would just encourage you to
can
kind
be
of
overwhelming,
look into that
and
if
so
you're
we
interested
see
in
that
finding
with
some
many of
pretty
the folks
easy
that we work with.
strategies
They
that you
need
could use
something.
with young people. And I know a VR counselor wouldn't necessarily do a safety plan or but I mean, if you have the time, it might be something you would
hold on to and take with them and
here's something
ponder,
you can take home and fill out that we can maybe have on site at the workplace for you, or you can share with an employer or family members who can help you.
One of the things that
know
we learned from the Promise Grant, and I heard during a presentation that they did in DC, was this notion of relentless engagement. And so when we talk about checking in with young people, and I know Adine knows this because she worked with that project, we can't stick to our VR framework of, we called you after 90 days, you didn't show up, after 30 days, you didn't follow up on this call, because we're going to lose young people. So we are the ones that have to be relentless about following up with them, checking in, even when they're saying that's not what they want, because we don't want to lose them. And sometimes that perseverance shows caring too. And young people need to know that we're not going to give up on them, as Hassan said earlier. And then recognizing successes. So you heard Francine talk about Josh, who had completed several certification programs in her session. And I saw several comments in the chat box to Josh from some of you in the audience congratulating him on that. So that it's always important to do. We have a clinic here in Phoenix that works only with young people, and they have the best space to walk into in terms of their lobby and the colors and the seating. It's, I don't know, Christopher and Karen, do people say hip anymore, or is it lit or cool? What's the terminology? What would you say? Would you really say hip, or would you say it's lit? That's what I thought. Okay, so I think I'm hip sometimes, but I'm really not, because I don't know to use the word lit. But But this place
I'm really sorry.
it's very
I'm kind of dealing with an issue
young
right
adult
now, so I'm kind of in and out, and I may have to step away.
friendly, right? So there are yoga balls there. There is an environment where young people want to hang out, and they don't typically want to hang out right in, you know, someplace that looks like a senior center. You're going to hear this from us continually, and that is that we need to ask for we need to ask the young people themselves, right? So when it says ask the youth, what works for you, what doesn't work for you? And some of these lessons I have learned the hard way. I have to share with you.
Something that was in the comment box that talked about that VR counselors can assist the individual and
so we have had
manage being triggered
occasions where, as I said earlier, we did,
as opposed to, and they use the example that they wouldn't necessarily maybe be able to use essential oils
a learning lab
that they might do at home.
And
so I think that's a really good point when you're looking at, you know, within your role.
Some of the feedback that we got from our young panel members was that they noticed that the professionals in the room were looking at their cell phones all the time. And they saw that as being very disrespectful and felt that the professionals weren't listening to them. And it wasn't, you know, I look at my cell phone all the time, but we had that, they told us if you're, they didn't even want people to be Googling things to find out information for them. Like they want you to be attending to them. And they were very verbal about that with the professionals in the room. So building rapport and really paying attention and being genuine has to happen all the time. Oh. Go, Christopher. Height. I need to, oh, groovy, that's an old one though, isn't it? Okay. Sway. Oh, hype, I get it, okay. See, I didn't even hear it right. That's all right. Well, I really appreciated that Hassan said earlier that you don't have to have experience. You don't have to be in crisis to relate to young people, because it's nice to know that not everyone's in crisis, because sometimes I don't relate to some of this verbiage. So I love that you guys are updating us. I'm sorry, Adine, did you have something to say? I think you're muted. Thank you. No, thank you, Aideen. I'm wondering, Carrie Lynn, if you have seen that be successful in the setting that you're in, where you've had different ways to help young people, not only be comfortable, but be able to, work through that level of anxiety or however it's coming out, whatever response you're seeing.
You should come back to me.
I would imagine, though, that Carrie Lynn, that you all build in,
I would use an example of
some
youth
activity
voice with
time too.
both
So
Karen
maybe
and
they
Chris,
are getting some of that occupational therapy or physical therapy and some other
graduate Bazan
activities
and
during the
graduate
day.
Davis that we have here on the panel.
Marching.
And essentially that is using, so we go out in the communities to help others become successful. So that is using the teens that we have here on the panel and going out there. They are the ones who are promoting what they can do to become successful with their stories. They have a lot of knowledge rather than the adults just putting it out there. The cadets using, the graduates or the cadets using the information that they have as mentors, peers, positive peer role models, going out there in the communities and working with other young folks. Just putting their voice out there and having others hear it.
And I'm going to start this with with a dean. And can you share a specific example of a situation that triggered a trauma response in you, what you did, or what someone who supports you did to make you feel more safe and empowered?
Yes.
So maybe you guys could explain what you do for Encore.
Oh, and Encore, that was a part of a program that we had to try out for public speaking wise. And we go out and we represent Free State. And we also, when we go out to represent Free State, we talk about it and how it helps us collectively as a unit and how it benefits us and how it can help benefit other youth like us.
Sometimes our audience was just like our own group. So like we had certain topics to talk about and we would all talk about it like with each other.
Thank you. How many of us have done some kind of pizza job in our lives, right? You wouldn't think pizza would be stressful, but so how about our young panelists? Christopher, can you share an example when you have
there's orientation
felt one of those
for
triggers
the next
that
class,
we
which is now
talked
class
about where
54
you
we participated in,
got anxious
which we
or
spoke
angry
to
or
the youth that went into
defiant,
the program,
and
we helped
what did you
encourage
do about
them
it?
and
Did
hear
anybody
their
else
stories
help
also,
you
while they also heard our
in
stories,
feeling better
saying
or
why we
safe
entered
or
the
more
program and how
empowered?
we got through the program, through the 22-week program. Yes. Well, right now they're candidates. We're graduates.
Wow. You are so grown up emotionally. Thank you for sharing that. Karen, do you have something that you would like to share in terms of how you worked through some triggers and if anybody helped you with that or if you figured it out on your own? So that kind of goes back to what Adine was saying earlier too, right? About some activity and doing and also having a different stimulus. So music sounds like it's really important to both of you. What do you listen to? I'm afraid to ask this question, because I won't know them probably. What do you listen to?
I think for me, it means providing opportunities and supports for youth to speak. I really appreciate that Christopher and Karen came because for their age, I think even just accepting those opportunities and being willing to step out, that says a lot about some strength that they have that is a good role model for other youth.
How about you, Karen? I'm wondering how many of the probably most folks in our audience know about Drake, right? And maybe The Weekend. Thank you. Well, and I remember, I think music is it's a great coping strategy too, and I loved the idea, Christopher, of just kind of reminiscing with your aunt too.
Actually, we were about to type in the
Carrie Lynn, do you want to share
and say what our superpowers were? But
with us and how you...
I feel that we both agreed on that we're strong, so I would say super strength.
Through it?
Because
we've overcame everything, basically. You know, whatever life threw at us, we overcame it.
I think your phone might be on mute, Carrie Lynn. That's okay. So that goes back also to Adine, what you were saying earlier is often people, want to have empathy for others and want to apply that and help others. Let me look really quickly at our chat box and see. We have some discussion about music, having a few strategies in advance of potential situations can be very helpful for being triggered, similar to a safety plan. Sounds good. And I would think that as a VR counselor, I would want to know what that safety plan is too, so that I can, you should be part of it as well, right? And know how to interact with the young person. So my PowerPoint has a mind of its own. It seems to be moving through towards later in the discussion. So let me try to get back to where we were. All right. So again, we are in the VR world, right? And so what we do is we want to make young people more independent. We want to, and with WIOA, we want to have even more enthusiastic career goals for young people, and we want to help them get into math and science and all of these other things. So we have to be aware that sometimes there are factors that can lead to re-traumatization. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. And we're not, so again, we don't want to focus on all of the difficulties that there might be, but we want to know that there are things that we can do about these possible situations that might be re-traumatizing, right? So there are things that happen at work that we can't control as VR professionals, and our young people can't either. And so really making sure then when we are looking at a job for them or talking to them about what they want to do, and I loved that Hassan earlier talked about a conversation with his VR counselor and how important it is really to support young people's goals, even though you think they may not be successful at it.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to all of our panelists for a very robust conversation. We could probably stay here for hours and delve into
help young people
so much more on this topic. Just taking a peek at some of the things that were in the chat box. There was a discussion kind of going on there about, you know, what about those of us that work in the field that have experienced job developer and how does that impact us in our work? And how much of your story do you share? And I wondered if anybody wanted to kind of touch on that.
Whether the job expectations have been made clear to the young person, what the supervisor is like, and how that interaction might be,
8 minutes or so,
and you know what the setting is.
So if
and
maybe
how
we can choose one person
social,
to do
and
a
you
very
all know
short
this.
response, and then I'll wrap up for the day. Thank you.
Some people like to be in a really social environment.
Nadine, is there anything that you might comment on in regards to that?
People don't. And so as much as we can find out about the work environment and make sure that it is a good job match with the young person that you're talking with. Did you want to add anything to that, Carrie Lynn or Adine? I know, Carrie Lynn, you guys work on setting young people up before, you know, once they leave the program too, right? Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, even attending a workshop like this can catch you by surprise in terms of how it can bring up things from either from your past or maybe from a loved one that you've been through. And sometimes sitting with individuals that you're serving that have experienced trauma and providing services, there's a balance because there's a connection I find with somebody who has been through trauma oftentimes really benefits from seeing somebody who's on the other side of that, who's survived it, maybe not the same trauma, but who's survived adversity and who can say, I understand pain, I understand adversity. I don't know what you have been through, but I want to let you know there's some hope. There's, you know, I think you don't ever want to say, I know how you feel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adine, and thank you to the whole panel. And, you know, Christopher and Karen, there were a lot of comments in the chat box, not just, I mean, specifically about you and congratulations to you, but also in terms of helping youth find their voice. And we're all just so proud of you and the accomplishments you've made and how you found that voice and you're going to continue to use it. So thank you all. And I want to put in a little plug, and I know Alicia's going to wrap it up here. But I'm talking about, there were comments in there about accepting where youth are at and validating the experience that they've had and continue to possibly have. And on our closing plenary on Thursday, we're going to have a discussion with Michigan and somebody from the San Diego County YMCA about a model called CAVE, which two of the letters in that acronym are acceptance and validation. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. So.
All right, thank you, Kim, so much. And I also want to just thank Karen, Adine, Christopher, and Carrie Lynn, and Karen, and for your insightful remarks, but also just helping us to just see the full picture of the work that's happening out in the field, and really with an eye towards how trauma-informed practices can really be used effectively to
looking at some ways that you
youth. So with that, I just want to thank the other panelists and speakers for the day, and thank you attendees. I know we kind of got a slightly rough start, but as you can see, it was worth it, right? We heard
these
some very
are all,
powerful testimony, and we learned about some really effective strategies. And so I would encourage everybody to tune in for day 2, where we're going to continue our conversation, first starting off with a panel that, again, talks about
what they can
the
expect.
Collaborations and the opportunities
We all know that
created,
VR can be a
through the
little
Workforce
confusing
Innovation
to...
and Opportunity Act. And then finally, we'll conclude with another panel on exploring new partnerships to reach opportunity, as well as the closing plenary discussion that Kim just noted. So again, I thank you all for your time, your attention, and we would just like to ask that before you leave, before you sign off for the day, that you would fill out a feedback form so that we can make day 2 really smooth, and any feedback that you have, we'd love to incorporate. So with that, have a wonderful evening, everybody. Take care.